The sound wasn't a scream. A scream implies hope, a frantic demand for someone to listen. This was just a wet, rhythmic clicking, like teeth snapping together inside a mouth full of blood. Valerie Hart stared at the waveform on her monitor, the green lines spiking violently against the black screen. The time was 3:14 a.m. Outside the reinforced glass of the dispatch center in Blackwood County, Montana, the rain was a hammer against the roof, drowning out the world. But inside, under the hum of fluorescent lights that smelled of burning dust, the only thing that mattered was the channel open on her console. Channel 9. Val pressed the headset tighter against her ear, her fingers hovering over the talk button. Her breath hitched. Channel 9 was dead air. It was the designated frequency for old Route 12, the Widow's Spine, a stretch of serpentine asphalt that wound up the backside of the mountain. The state had put up concrete barriers and chain-link fences across the access points back in '98 after the mudslide took 3 families and a school bus into the gorge. No radios went up there, no patrols, no signal. "Blackwood dispatch to unidentified caller," Val said. Her voice was steady, forged by 15 years of midnight shifts, but the hair on her arms stood upright. "I have an open line on restricted frequency. Identify." Static hissed back, not the clean digital white noise of modern tech, but the thick, soupy crackle of analog interference. It sounded heavy, like the air in a cellar that hasn't been opened in decades. Click, click, hooah. A heavy exhale. It was too close to the microphone. "This is dispatch," Val repeated, her eyes darting to the GPS map. The screen showed nothing. No blips, no transponders, just the gray void of the closed mountain sector. "You are broadcasting on a closed loop," she said. "If you can hear me, state your emergency." A voice cut through the static. It was male, low and warped, as if the speaker were talking through a mouthful of water. Is the glass holding?" Val frowned, leaning in. "Repeat? Caller, I am not receiving your location. What glass?" "The windshield. The mud is heavy. Are we still real, ma'am?" The question hung in the recycled air of the station. Are we still real? "Sir, listen to me," Val said, her fingers flying across the keyboard to trace the signal source. "I need you to give me a mile marker. Can you see a mile marker?" "Mile." The voice drifted, swallowed by a surge of mechanical screeching, like metal shearing off metal. "We passed the barrier. We just wanted to see the view. The earth moved. Why is it so dark?" "I'm sending units to the lower gate." Val grabbed the landline to wake up the on-call deputy. "Stay on the line." "Don't," the voice said, suddenly clear, terrifyingly lucid. "The tower isn't on, Val. How are you hearing me?" Val froze. Her hand stopped halfway to the phone. She hadn't given her name. She never gave her name on the air. "Who is this?" Val whispered, breaking protocol. The response was a sound she would never forget. It was the sound of a radio dial spinning rapidly, skipping through channels, snatching fragments of words from the ether. "Cold, darkness, Val, below, waiting, listen, listen." The line went dead. Val sat in the silence, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The green line on the monitor flatlined. She looked at the signal origin triangulation that had finally finished processing on her secondary screen. It pinpointed the source of the call. It wasn't on the road. It wasn't at the barrier. The signal had originated from 300 feet below the asphalt of the widow's spine, from the bottom of the ravine where the mud had settled 26 years ago. The sun didn't rise over Blackwood County the next morning. The gray sky just bruised into a lighter shade of charcoal. Val hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the wet click of the radio, the voice asking if the glass was holding. She had logged the incident as a signal intrusion/prank to keep Sheriff Hicks off her back, but she sent a work order to the County Infrastructure Division. She needed to know what was transmitting on a dead channel. By 4 p.m., Elias Miller was halfway up the service trail in his rusted Ford Bronco, the suspension groaning as the tires fought the washout. Miller was a lineman who looked like he was carved out of dried tobacco and gristle. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in overtime, and Val had authorized double pay for a hazardous terrain check. He parked where the asphalt crumbled into the gravel, the official "do not enter" line of the widow's spine. From here he had to hike. The target was Relay Station 4 Alpha, nicknamed the Needle, a solitary metal skeleton perched on a limestone ridge overlooking the closed sector. The woods here were wrong. That was the only word Miller could find for it. The pines grew too close together, their branches weaving a suffocating canopy that blocked out the weak afternoon light. The air smelled of wet copper and ozone, the scent of a thunderstorm that never actually breaks. Miller keyed his shoulder mic. "Dispatch, this is Tech 1. I'm at the perimeter, heading up to the shack. It's quiet enough to hear a spider fart out here." "Copy, Tech 1. Val's voice crackled in her earpiece. She sounded tight, strung out. "Proceed with caution, Elias. The signal was strong. Someone had to be boosting it from the site." Miller grunted, shifting his tool belt. He climbed the ridge, his boots sliding on slate and dead needles. When the relay shack came into view, he stopped. The structure was a corrugated tin box at the base of the tower, rusted to the color of dried blood. It had been decommissioned in 2005. The power lines leading to it had been cut and coiled years ago. But the tower was singing. It was a low vibrational hum that Miller felt in his teeth before he heard it, a thrumming, throbbing resonance that vibrated the ground beneath his boots. "Val," Miller said, his voice dropping, "I'm looking at the shack. The obstruction lights are active. I repeat, the obstruction lights are flashing." "That's impossible," Val replied immediately. "Grid confirms that sector is dead. There's no current." tell that to my eyes," Miller muttered. He approached the door. The padlock was still rusted shut, fused by time and elements. No one had been inside this room in 20 years. He pulled a bolt cutter from his pack, snapped the lock, and kicked the door open. The smell hit him first, stagnant water and burning hair. Miller clicked on his heavy-duty flashlight and swept the beam across the interior. The dust motes danced in the light, swirling in unnatural patterns. Against the back wall, the old analog receiver banks were lit up like a Christmas tree. Needles bounced frantically on the VU meters. Tape reels on the auxiliary recording deck were spinning, the magnetic tape spool through the heads with a soft, rhythmic shh, shh, shh. Miller walked over, his stomach tightening. He traced the thick black power cable coming out of the back of the main console. It snaked across the concrete floor, leading toward the corner of the room. It didn't go to a generator. It didn't go to a battery bank. The cable went straight down into a jagged hole in the concrete foundation, disappearing into the earth. He knelt, shining his light into the hole. The insulation on the wire was wet, coated in a thick, viscous slime, and the hole, it wasn't drilled. It looked like the concrete had been chewed from below. "Dispatch," Miller said, his voice trembling for the first time in his career. "I found the power source, but it ain't electrical." "Explain," Val demanded. Miller reached out to touch the spinning tape reel. It was warm. He leaned in close to the playback speaker, turning the volume knob that was caked in grime. He didn't hear static. He heard a choir of voices, dozens of them layered over one another in a chaotic, screaming harmony. But they weren't screaming in fear. They were screaming coordinates. Latitude 45. Pressure dropping. Tell her I love. Left leg is gone. Oxygen. Oxygen. Miller jerked his hand back as if the machine had bitten him. "Val," he choked out, "you need to hear this. This isn't a broadcast. It's a playback." "Elias, get out of there," Val ordered, her professional calm fracturing. "Wait," Miller whispered, staring at the label on the spinning tape reel. The handwriting was faded, scribbled in blue ink. It didn't say archive. It didn't say log. It read Harvest, week 43. And then the tape snapped. The spinning reel halted. The red light on the console blinked once, then turned a solid, unblinking green. The speaker crackled, and a voice, crystal clear, devoid of static, filled the small shack. "Technician Miller, your heart rate is elevated. Are you reporting a malfunction?" Miller spun around, flashlight raised as a weapon. The room was empty. The voice came from the speakers, but the tone, it wasn't electronic. It was intimate, wet. "Who is this?" Miller shouted at the machine. "We are the circuit," the voice replied, and the floor beneath the shack groaned, a sound deep within the bedrock, shifting as if the mountain itself was rolling over in its sleep.
Elias Miller didn't scream. He acted on instinct, the muscle memory of a man who fixed broken things for a living. If a machine is dangerous, you kill the power. He lunged for the thick black cable disappearing into the jagged hole in the foundation. He wrapped his gloved hands around it and heaved, bracing his boot against the concrete. It didn't pull taut like copper wire. It stretched. It possessed the sickening, elastic give of a tendon. With a wet, tearing sound, the cable snapped, but there was no spark, no smell of burning insulation. Instead, a thick black fluid sprayed across Miller's chest and face, hot and smelling of iron and deep, stagnant earth. The cable writhed in his grip for a split second, pulsating, before going limp. The lights on the console died instantly. The room plunged into darkness, save for the erratic beam of Miller's flashlight. "Dispatch!" Miller yelled, spitting the metallic taste from his mouth. He scrambled backward, wiping the slime from his eyes. "I cut the line! I'm bugging out!" In the dispatch center, Val Hart pressed her headset so hard against her skull her ear cartilage ached. "Elias? Elias, talk to me! What was that sound?" Through the static, she heard him running, heavy boots slamming against gravel, the slam of the tin door, then the ragged, terrified panting of a smoker sprinting for his life. "It's bleeding, Val," Miller wheezed into his mic. "The wiring, it was bleeding. I'm heading to the truck. Jesus!" "What?" Val stood up, gripping the edge of her console. "What do you see?" "The birds," Miller whispered. The running stopped. "Elias, keep moving!" "The birds, Val. Look at the birds." Miller was standing at the edge of the clearing, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom of the pines. The trees were full of crows, hundreds of them. They sat motionless on the branches, staring down at him. They weren't cawing, they weren't preening, they were clicking. Click, click, click. It was the same sound Val had heard on the radio the night before, a rhythmic, mechanical ticking coming from 1,000 organic throats. "They're sinking," Miller whispered, horror dawning in his voice. "They're acting like transmitters." Suddenly, the crows stopped. In the absolute silence of the valley, a voice erupted from the trees. It didn't come from a specific direction. It came from everywhere, amplified by the acoustic bowl of the valley. "Tech 1 confirmed disconnection," the forest said. It was Val's voice. Miller spun around, his light wild. "Val, are you on the PA? How are you doing that?" Back at the station, Val's blood ran cold. She hadn't spoken. "Elias, that's not me! Get to the truck, now!" Miller bolted. He didn't look back at the shack or the birds. He threw himself down the slope, sliding on the scree, tearing his uniform on the briars. The voice chased him. It rolled down the hill like an avalanche of sound. "Ticket closed! Ticket closed! Ticket closed!" It wasn't just Val's voice anymore. It was shifting, pitching down, becoming guttural. Miller hit the bottom of the trail and scrambled toward his Bronco. He fumbled for his keys, his hands slick with the black fluid and sweat. He ripped the door open and threw himself inside, slamming the lock down. Safe, steel and glass. He jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over with a roar. He gasped for air, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He reached for the radio to tell Val he was rolling, but the radio was already on. The display glowed a toxic green. The volume was cranked to the max, and coming through the speakers was the sound of a truck door opening, then the sound of a man panting, then the sound of keys jingling. Miller froze. He was listening to a recording of his own engine starting. And then, on the tape, a voice spoke from the passenger seat, a seat that was currently empty in reality. "Buckle up, Elias." In the terrified silence of the cab, Miller slowly turned his head to the empty seat beside him. The upholstery was depressed, as if under a heavy weight. The radio screamed. Valerie Hart watched the GPS tracker on her screen. The dot representing Elias Miller's Bronco was moving, but it was moving erratically, jerking sideways, accelerating too fast, tracing a line that looked less like a driving path and more like the scribbles of a madman. "Elias," she screamed into her headset, "talk to me. What is happening?" In the Bronco, Elias Miller couldn't speak. The air in the cab had turned freezing, causing the windows to fog up instantly from the inside. But it wasn't condensation. The glass was clouding with a greasy, yellowish residue. The depression in the passenger seat shifted. The worn fabric groaned under the weight of something heavy and unseen. Miller stomped on the gas pedal, his boots skidding on the rubber mat. The truck fishtailed on the gravel, the rear end swinging dangerously close to the drop-off. The radio display flickered, the green light strobing. "Turn around," the radio said. It was Miller's voice. "We missed the turn." "Shut up," Miller roared, slamming his fist into the dashboard. He couldn't turn the radio off. The knob just spun loosely in his fingers. He yanked the steering wheel to the left, fighting to keep the tires on the washed-out trail. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the trees. But the trees weren't passing by. They seemed to be stretching, elongating, pulling toward the truck like iron filings to a magnet. Then Miller felt it. A hand. It wasn't a human hand. It felt like a collection of cold, damp wires wrapped in wet leather. It placed itself gently on his right knee. Miller looked down. There was nothing there, just the sensation of pressure clamping down hard enough to bruise. "Get off me," he thrashed, taking one hand off the wheel to claw at his own leg. His fingers met nothing but air, yet the pressure increased. It was crushing his kneecap. Signal strength increasing, merging in 3, 2. "Val!" Miller screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail of pure terror. "It's in the truck! It's in the goddamn truck!" In the dispatch center, Val heard the scream. It was so loud it distorted the audio input, peaking the levels into the red. Then came the sound of impact. It wasn't the crunch of metal against a tree. It sounded softer, wet, like a melon being dropped from a roof magnified 1,000 times. The GPS dot on Val's screen stopped moving. It hovered right over the edge of mile marker 43. "Elias?" Val whispered. Her hands were shaking so bad she couldn't type. "Dispatch to Tech 1, status check." Static. Then a low, rhythmic thumping sound. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like a heartbeat, slow and laborious. "Elias, if you can hear me, pee your mic twice." The radio crackled. "Elias isn't here right now," a voice said. It wasn't the distorted demon voice from before. It was a woman's voice, young, terrified. It was the voice of Sarah Jenkins, a college student who had gone missing on that road in 1994. Val remembered her poster. She remembered the search party. "He's calibrating," Sarah's voice continued, trembling. "He's trying to fit inside the wire. It hurts him, Val. It's so tight." Val felt bile rise in her throat. "Who is this? Where is Deputy Miller?" "He's becoming the signal," Sarah whispered. "Just like I did. Just like the bus driver. We're all in the tower. It keeps us warm. But we need a new operator. The old one is decaying." "I'm sending police," Val said, her voice hard, masking the trembling. "I'm sending everyone." "Don't send them to the road," Sarah warned. "The road is just the antenna. The broadcast, it's coming from inside your headset." Val ripped the headset off her ears and threw it onto the desk as if it were a venomous snake. It clattered against the keyboard, but she could still hear it. Lying on the desk, the small earpiece buzzed like a dying insect. "Can you hear me now?" it chirped. "Can you hear me now? Good." Val backed away from the console, her back hitting the wall of the break room. The lights in the dispatch center flickered.
The hum of the servers deepened, shifting pitch, matching the exact frequency of the thumping heart she had heard moments ago. And then, every phone in the dispatch center began to ring at once. 20 lines, all lighting up, all coming from the same caller ID, unknown mile 43.
The sound of 20 landline phones ringing in unison wasn't a noise. It was a physical assault. It vibrated the floor tiles, rattled the coffee mugs on the break table, and drilled into the base of Val's skull. Ring, ring. Val didn't answer. She scrambled under the main terminal desk, her hands fumbling for the master kill switch. It was a heavy red lever designed for catastrophic power surges or lightning strikes. She grabbed it with both hands and yanked it down. With a heavy thud, the breakers tripped. The overhead fluorescence died instantly, plunging the room into the gray gloom of the emergency exit signs. The computer monitors went black. The hum of the cooling fans ceased, but the phones kept ringing. They didn't even skip a beat. If anything, they got louder in the dark. The little red LEDs on the base units blinked in the shadows like a swarm of angry eyes. "Stop it!" Val screamed, backing away until she hit the reinforced glass door of the command center. "Stop ringing!" The door swiped open behind her. Sheriff Boyd Hicks stood there, silhouetted by the hallway lights, a half-eaten cruller in one hand and a look of profound irritation on his face. He was a big man, built like a defensive lineman who had gone to seed, with a face that had seen every kind of trouble Blackwood County had to offer, except this. "Val, what the hell is going on?" Hicks bellowed over the din. "Why are the lights out? And for Christ's sake, answer the damn phones!" "Don't touch them!" Val lunged, grabbing his arm. Her grip was frantic, her fingernails digging into his uniform jacket. "Boyd, don't touch them! The lines are dead! I cut the power! They shouldn't be ringing!" Hicks looked up at the dark ceiling, then at the lit-up phone bank. He frowned, shaking her off. "Backup battery, Val. You know that. Probably a glitch in the trunk line. Sounds like every drunk in the county is calling at once." He stepped past her, moving toward the primary desk. "Boyd, no, it's the mountain," Val pleaded, terror making her voice thin. "Elias is gone. The tower took him. It's calling us." Hicks paused, looking back at her with a mix of pity and concern. "Val, you've been on nights too long. Elias is probably just out of range." He reached for line 1. Val covered her ears and squeezed her eyes shut. She couldn't watch. She couldn't stop him. Hicks lifted the receiver. "Sheriff's Department, line recorded. State your—" He stopped. The room went silent. The other 19 phones stopped ringing the instant the receiver touched his ear. The sudden quiet was heavy, pressurized. Hicks stood frozen, the phone pressed to his head. In the dim red light of the exit sign, Val saw his face change. The irritation evaporated, replaced with a slack-jawed confusion, and then a slow, creeping pallor. "What?" Hicks whispered. "Who is this? That's not funny." He looked at Val, his eyes wide, pleading for an explanation. It says it's me." Hicks swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "It's my voice, but older. It sounds wet. It's reading a eulogy." He listened for another second, and then his knees buckled. He braced himself against the desk. "It's reading my eulogy, Val. It says I died of a cardiac event in this room. Time of death, 4:18 a.m. Val looked at the battery-operated clock on the wall. It was 4:16 a.m. "Put it down," Val screamed, rushing forward to slap the receiver from his hand, but Hicks wouldn't let go. His hand was clamped around the plastic handle with a death grip. His eyes rolled back in his head, showing only the whites. A line of dark blood began to trickle from his nose. "I can see it," Hicks mumbled, his voice taking on that same slurry, distorted quality she had heard on the radio. "I can see the ravine. It's not mud down there. It's flesh. The whole mountain is meat, and it's hungry." Crack! The sound came from the phone receiver. It was the sound of plastic fracturing. Hicks screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was the sound of a man being erased. He fell to his knees, still clutching the phone, as the cord disconnected from the wall, Val realized with horror, began to pulse. The black coil of the phone cord swelled, tightening around his wrist like a constrictor snake. It wasn't plastic anymore. It was veined. It was warm. "Help me," Hicks gurgled, blood bubbling past his lips. "It's pulling me in. The signal. It's pulling me through the wire." Val grabbed the scissors from the desk drawer and slashed at the cord. The blades met resistance, like cutting through raw steak. Dark fluid sprayed across her face, the same black slime Miller had described. With a final sickening tear, the cord severed. Hicks fell back onto the floor, gasping, clutching his arm. The phone receiver was still fused to his skin. The plastic melted into his skin, the wire writhing on the floor like a severed worm. "Get up!" Val hauled him up by the collar. "We have to leave, now!" "Val," Hicks wheezed, pointing a shaking finger at the bank of monitors. The screens had turned back on, but there was no power. They weren't showing the map anymore. They were showing a live video feed. It was a camera angle from the ceiling of the dispatch center, looking down at them. But in the video, Val and Hicks weren't alone. Standing behind them in the shadowy corner of the room was a figure. It was tall, draped in tattered lineman's gear, its face a blur of static. Val spun around to look at the corner. It was empty. She looked back at the screen. The figure in the monitor raised a hand and pointed at the clock. 4:17 a.m.
The red digits on the wall clock didn't tick, they bled into the next minute. 4:17:30. 30 seconds until the prophecy. Valerie Hart grabbed the back of Sheriff Hicks's tactical vest. He was dead weight, his boots scuffing uselessly against the linoleum. The room was dissolving around them. The shadows in the corners weren't just absences of light anymore. They were physical, stretching out like tendrils of black oil, seeking purchase on the floor. "The door!" Val grunted, heaving Hicks toward the exit. "Boyd, move your legs!" Hicks was staring at his own left hand. The plastic receiver of the phone had fused completely to his palm, the black plastic merging with his skin in a grotesque, seamless graft. The wire trailing from it wasn't dead. It was rooting into his forearm, pulsing with a faint, bioluminescent green rhythm. "It's rewriting me," Hicks whispered, his eyes glassy. "I can hear the drivers, Val. They're driving in circles in my blood." Val ignored him. She hit the crash bar on the heavy security door. Locked. The electronic maglock was engaged. The keypad was dead, along with the rest of the building's power. Yet the magnetic seal hummed with a strength that felt impossible. "Open!" Val shrieked, slamming her shoulder against the steel. It didn't budge. It felt like hitting a solid wall of bedrock. She spun around. The monitors on the far wall were glowing brighter. On the screen, the static blurred figure in the corner, the thing that looked like a man made of wet charcoal, took a step forward. In the room, the air pressure dropped so sharply Val's ears popped. The silence was sucked out, replaced by a rising frequency. It started as a whine and deepened into a roar, the sound of a landslide happening in slow motion. Val looked at the clock. 4:17:50. 10 seconds. On the monitor, the figure raised a hand. In reality, Hicks gasped, clutching his chest, his back arched, lifting him off the floor as if he were being hoisted by an invisible hook. "My heart! It's stopping!" "No!" Val scanned the room for a weapon. Her eyes landed on the fire extinguisher mounted by the frame. She ripped it off the wall. She didn't aim for the lock. She aimed for the tempered glass observation window next to the door. Smash! The glass spiderwebbed. On the screen, the figure was now standing directly over Hicks. It reached down, its fingers sinking into his chest on the monitor. In the room, Hicks's shirt depressed, ribs cracking audibly under invisible pressure. 4:17:58. Val swung again. With a primal scream, she put every ounce of fear and adrenaline into the swing. The heavy red cylinder crashed through the safety glass, showering the hallway with diamonds. "Go!" She grabbed Hicks by the collar and threw herself through the jagged hole. They tumbled onto the hallway carpet, a tangle of limbs and broken glass. Inside the dispatch center, the clock clicked. 4:18. A sound erupted from the room they had just fled. A wet, muffled explosion, like a scuba tank rupturing inside a whale. Val scrambled backward on her elbows, dragging Hicks with her. She looked back through the broken window. The dispatch center was gone. The room hadn't exploded in fire. It had been reclaimed. A thick, rapid growth of black mold and gray roots had instantly covered every surface. The desks, the monitors, the chairs, they were draped in a sudden unnatural overgrowth of vegetation that looked like petrified nerves. The monitors, now half swallowed by the fungal mass, flickered one last time. The figure was gone.
But in the center of the room, where Hicks had been kneeling seconds ago, the floor tiles were scorched in the shape of a human shadow. Hicks lay on his back in the hallway, gasping for air. The receiver phone on his hand was gone. Where it had been fused, his skin was raw, branded with a pattern that looked like a circuit board. He clutched his chest, checking for a heartbeat. I'm here," he wisped. "I missed the appointment." Val slumped against the wall, wiping blood from a cut on her cheek. "We're out. We need to get to the radio in your cruiser. We need the state police." Hicks shook his head slowly. He pointed down the hallway towards the front entrance of the station. The fluorescent lights in the hallway were flickering. Buzz, click, buzz, click. But they weren't flickering randomly. They were flickering in sequence, traveling down the hall away from them. And from the ceiling speakers, the PA system meant for announcements, a new sound began to play. It wasn't static. It was music. It was a distorted, slowed-down version of a 1950s doo-wop song. Earth Angel, Earth Angel, will you be mine? "That song," Hicks whispered, his eyes widening in recognition. "That was on the radio in the school bus, the one the mud took in '98. The music warped, the vocals stretching into a deep demonic groan. "My darling, dear, love you all the time." At the far end of the hallway, the double doors to the lobby slowly pushed open. They didn't open outward, they were sucked inward, and rolling in from the lobby was a thick, knee-high fog. It wasn't mist, it was dust, the gray, choking dust of a pulverized mountain road. "The road isn't closed anymore, Val," Hicks said, his voice hollow. "It came to us."
The dust didn't behave like particulate matter. It didn't float or drift. It crawled. Valerie Hart covered her mouth with the crook of her elbow, coughing as the gray cloud rolled over her boots. It tasted of pulverized limestone and diesel, the specific acrid flavor of a highway accident scene. It coated her tongue with a grit that felt like ground glass. "Don't breathe it in," Val choked out, grabbing Hicks's good arm. "Boyd, stay with me." Sheriff Hicks was staring into the swirling gray fog filling the hallway. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated to black saucers. He wasn't looking at the station lobby anymore. He was looking at something 26 years in the past. "The wipers," Hicks mumbled, his voice trembling. "They're stuck. I can't clear the mud." "We're not in a car," Val hissed, dragging him forward. The floor beneath them felt wrong. The smooth industrial linoleum of the police station was gone. Under her boots, the surface was rough, uneven, and cold. She looked down. Through the swirling dust, she saw the floor was black, cracked, pitted. A jagged yellow line, faded and chipped, ran down the center of the hallway. The station was metabolizing into the road. The walls, once beige drywall hung with community notices and wanted posters, were pushing outward, dissolving into vertical sheets of wet shale and dripping roots. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, but the light they cast was no longer clinical white. It was the sickly sodium vapor orange of old street lamps. "Earth Angel, will you be mine?" The music from the PA system was deafening now, reverberating off the stone walls, but underneath the melody there was a new sound. Screech, grind, snap. It was the sound of a heavy chassis twisting under immense pressure, the sound of rivets popping like gunshots. "Val," said Hicks, stopping dead in the middle of the blacktop hallway. He raised his branded hand, the circuit board burns glowing with a faint necrotic light. "Traffic ahead." "There is no traffic," Val screamed, panic finally starting to fray the edges of her resolve. "It's a hallucination. We just need to get to the front doors." "No," whispered Hicks. "Look." He pointed into the fog. Two orb-like lights pierced the gloom about 30 feet ahead. They were dim yellow and set wide apart. Headlights. But they weren't on the ground. They were 6 feet up in the air, and they were tilted at a 45-degree angle. Val froze. The shape materialized out of the dust. It was the front grille of a 1990s International school bus, but it wasn't driving toward them. It was embedded in the hallway. The front of the bus jutted out of the left wall and disappeared into the right, as if the station hallway had intersected perpendicularly with the buried wreck. The metal was crushed, compacted like a soda can. The windshield was shattered, the safety glass held together by the lamination, creating a spiderweb of opaque white. Inside the bus, behind the shattered glass, shadows moved. Small shadows. They were shifting in the seats, bouncing rhythmically as if the bus were idling over rough terrain. Thump, 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 thump. The sound of small hands hitting the glass. "Let us out," a chorus of voices whispered. It didn't come from the bus. It came from the walls, from the floor, from the inside of Val's own skull. "The mud is heavy. We missed our stop." "Jesus Christ," sobbed Hicks. He reached for his service weapon, but his hand was shaking so badly he couldn't unholster it. "That's the bus. That's the 404. I signed the recovery report. We never got it out. It was too deep." "We have to go under it," said Val, her voice sounding foreign to her own ears. "Boyd, we have to crawl under the chassis to get to the lobby." "I can't," backed Hicks. "They're watching me. The driver, he's looking right at me." Val looked at the driver's seat. Slumped over the massive steering wheel was a figure. It was wearing a uniform that had rotted into the flesh. The head was turned toward them. The skin was gray, slack, and waterlogged. But the eyes were missing. In the sockets, 2 small red lights blinked in perfect unison with the radio tower's beacon. Blink, blink, blink. The bus horn suddenly blared, a long, agonizing, continuous note that vibrated Val's teeth. Honk! "Move!" Val shoved Hicks. She dropped to her knees on the asphalt floor. "Crawl, now!" She scrambled under the twisted bumper of the bus. The smell was overpowering. Stagnant swamp water, rust, and the sickeningly sweet scent of old lunches rotting in lunchboxes for 2 decades. Above her, the undercarriage of the bus groaned. Fluid dripped on her neck. Black, viscous oil mixed with something redder, thicker. "Boyd!" she screamed back. Hicks was on his hands and knees following her, but he wasn't moving. He was staring at the floor. The asphalt under his hands was rippling. "It's sticky," whimpered Hicks. "Val, the road, it's holding me."
Val turned back, shining her small pocket light.
The black top had turned into a thick, tar-like sludge. It had swallowed Hicks's hands up to the wrists. He pulled, screaming, but the road just stretched, black tendrils clinging to his skin like taffy. And then a hand reached out of the asphalt. It was a gray, decayed hand, then another, then a face. A woman's face rising from the road surface like a swimmer surfacing from a pool of oil. She was wearing a tattered raincoat. "Ticket, please," the woman rasped, her mouth full of tar. She grabbed Hicks by the throat. "Shoot it!" Val screamed, scrambling backward, her back scraping against the sharp metal of the bus undercarriage. "Boyd, shoot it!" Hicks struggled, his eyes bulging. He managed to rip his right hand free from the tar with a wet, sucking sound. He drew his pistol, but he didn't aim at the woman. He slowly, shakily turned the gun toward his own temple. The woman in the tar smiled, revealing teeth made of broken glass. "The signal requires a receiver," she hissed. "Open the channel, Sheriff." "No!" Val lunged forward, grabbing Hicks's boot. Hicks looked at her. A single tear cut a track through the dust on his face. "The static, it's so loud, Val. It's so beautiful." He pulled the trigger. Click. No bang, no flash, just a wet mechanical click. Hicks frowned, looking at the gun. He pulled the trigger again. Click. He looked at the woman in the tar. She was still smiling. "Ballistics are offline in this sector. Only the signal works here." She tightened her grip on his throat and pulled downward. Hicks didn't fight this time. He sank. The asphalt road opened up like quicksand. First his chest, then his chin, then his nose. His eyes locked onto Val's, filled with an infinite, terrified acceptance. And then he was gone. The road smoothed over instantly. Val was alone under the bus. The horn stopped blaring. The music stopped. The only sound left was the dripping of the black fluid from the chassis above her, landing on the spot where the sheriff had been absorbed. Drip, drip, drip. Val scrambled backward, hyperventilating, crab-walking until she cleared the other side of the bus wreck. She stood up, her legs jelly, and spun around. She was in the lobby. But the glass front doors of the station were gone. In their place was a solid wall of rock, and sitting at the reception desk, wearing the station's headset, was a corpse. Valerie Hart stood in the center of the lobby, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps that fogged the air in front of her face. The air here was colder than the hallway, colder than the grave. It possessed the absolute stillness of a deep cave, undisturbed by wind or warmth. She spun in a slow circle. The double glass doors that should have led to the parking lot were gone.
In their place was a wall of solid, stratified limestone, damp and weeping with condensation. It wasn't rubble, it wasn't a blockage. The rock had simply replaced the exit. The geologic strata lined up perfectly with the molding of the ceiling. They weren't trapped in the building was buried. "No," Val whispered, the word dying instantly in the heavy air. "We were on the surface. I saw the rain." She turned to the reception desk. The corpse sitting in the ergonomic chair was small, withered, and dressed in a beige dispatcher's uniform that hadn't been issued since the mid-90s. The fabric was stiff with dust, hanging loosely off a frame that was little more than dried tendon and bone. But the corpse wasn't resting, it was working. Its desiccated hands were poised over a computer keyboard that was melted into the desk's surface. The fingers, tipped with yellowed, curling nails, twitched spasmodically. Click-clack, click-clack. The sound was impossibly loud in the silence. Val took a step closer, drawn by a horrific curiosity she couldn't suppress. The nameplate on the desk was tarnished but legible. Martha Vance, Senior Dispatch. Martha Vance. Val remembered the name. She was the night shift lead who had vanished the night of the landslide. The official report said she had left her post and driven up to the pass to help. They never found her car. Now Val knew why. She hadn't driven anywhere. The mountain had come for her, just like it had come for Hicks. Martha's head was encased in a heavy, antiquated headset. The wire didn't plug into a console. It went straight into the back of her neck, disappearing into the dried, papery skin just below the hairline. The corpse's head snapped up. There were no eyes in the sockets, just two small spinning reels of magnetic tape whirring softly in the dark cavern of her skull. "Ticket open," Martha's voice broadcasted. It didn't come from the corpse's mouth, which was sewn shut with copper wire, but from the PA speakers in the ceiling. The crisp, professional, and utterly devoid of humanity. "Martha?" Joan choked out, backing away until her heels hit the limestone wall. "Martha, it's Val. I started in '09. You're listed as missing." The tape reels in the eye sockets spun faster. "Missing is a clerical error. We are not missing. We are archived. We are the buffer." The corpse hand slammed down on the enter key. Behind the desk, the large digital board that usually displayed active 911 calls flickered to life. But instead of addresses and incident codes, it showed a list of names. Miller, E, upload complete. Hicks, B, upload complete. Jenkins, S, upload complete. Hart, V, processing. "I'm not dead," Val said, her voice trembling but gaining an edge of defiance. She looked around for a weapon, a rock, anything. "I am alive. I am breathing. You are noise," Martha replied. The corpse stood up. The movement was jerky, unnatural, like a puppet being yanked by invisible strings. "Your shift begins now," Martha said. "Put it on. The voices are waiting. They're so cold, Val. They need your warmth to speak." "Go to hell," Val screamed. She grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the side table and swung it with all her might. The base of the lamp connected with Martha's skull. There was no crunch of bone. There was a sound like metal hitting ceramic. The skull cracked open, but there was no brain inside. Instead, a swarm of black moths erupted from the fracture. They poured out of Martha's head in a thick, fluttering cloud, filling the lobby with the sound of 1,000,000 papery wings. They weren't normal moths. Their wings were stamped with patterns that looked like QR codes and circuit diagrams. They swarmed Val. She screamed, batting at them, but they were relentless. They crawled into her hair, down her collar, into her ears. They didn't bite, they hummed, a low vibrational hum that resonated with the bones of her inner ear. Through the cloud of insects, Val saw the limestone wall behind her begin to dissolve. The rock melted away, revealing not the outside world, but a dark, rain-lashed forest. And in the center of the forest, towering above the trees, was the tower. It wasn't a steel structure anymore. It was a spire of fused bone and black metal, rising hundreds of feet into the storm. Red lights blinked rhythmically along its spine. Blink, blink, blink. The moths pushed her backward, not away from the horror, but toward it. They were herding her into the breach. "No, let me go!" Val shrieked, stumbling backward into the mud of the forest floor. She was no longer in the station. She was at mile 43. The rain hit her face, cold, oily, and smelling of copper. She scrambled up, slipping in the mud. She looked back for the station, for the limestone wall. It was gone. There was only the dark woods, the screaming wind, and the tower looming over her like a jagged god. And at the base of the tower, waiting in the open doorway of the control shack, was a figure wearing Sheriff Hicks's uniform. But it wasn't Hicks. The figure stepped into the light. It had no face. Its head was a large, multifaceted speaker, the kind used in warning sirens. The speaker crackled. "Valerie, you're late. The audience is listening." The creature wearing Sheriff Hicks's uniform did not run. It glided over the mud, the heavy police boots hovering inches above the slurry. The speaker that replaced its head swiveled with a rusty screech, tracking Val's movement through the thermal signature of her fear. "Valerie," the speaker boomed, the audio quality shifting from her father's voice to the jagged digital tearing of a corrupted MP3 file. "You are running from your promotion. This is a non-compliance event." Val scrambled up the ridge, grabbing at saplings to pull herself forward. But the trees screamed when she touched them. The bark felt like scabbed skin, warm and slightly damp. When her fingers dug in, the wood bled a dark, viscous sap that smelled of copper. She wasn't in a forest. She was climbing the external nervous system of the mountain. "Stay back!" she screamed, throwing a handful of the wet, breathing mud at the thing behind her. The Hicks thing stopped. The speaker head pulsed, the cone expanding like a throat. It didn't dodge the mud. It emitted a burst of sound, a sub-bass frequency so low it liquefied the ground beneath Val's feet. She fell, sliding down the embankment, tumbling through briars that were actually tangled coils of barbed wire. She slammed into the base of the tower. Up close, the structure was a monstrosity of impossible engineering. It wasn't built, it was fused. Steel girders were welded to human femurs. The cross bracing was lashed together with spinal cords, and pulsating through the entire structure were thousands of black cables, thick as pythons, pumping a glowing green fluid up toward the antenna array at the summit. Val looked up. The top of the tower disappeared into the storm clouds, but she could see the silhouette of bodies hanging from the crossbeams like bell clappers. They were swinging in the wind, and as they swung, they hit the metal struts. Clang, thud, clang. They were the percussion section of the signal. "Don't look up," a voice whispered right beside her ear. Val spun around. Protruding from the base of the tower, fused into the metal foundation from the waist down, was a man. He was wearing a faded flannel shirt. His skin was gray, translucent, revealing the wires snaking under his dermis. It was the field technician, the one she had sent out hours ago, or years ago. "Elias," Val breathed, crawling toward him. "Elias! Oh God, help me!" Elias Miller opened his eyes. They were solid white, backlit by the tower's energy. "I can't help you, Val," he rasped. "I'm the ground wire now. I keep the surge from burning out the core." He reached out a trembling hand. "You have to go inside. The chair is empty. If you don't sit in it, the tower overloads. If it overloads, it broadcasts to the whole country." "I'm not sitting in that chair," Val sobbed, backing away. "I'm not dying here." "You're already dead, Val," Elias smiled sadly. "We all died when we answered the call. The moment you put on that headset at the station, you accepted the terms of service." Crack! A sound like a thunderclap shattered the air. The Hicks thing had reached the bottom of the ridge. It stood 10 feet away, towering over them. The speaker head hissed, static spitting from the mesh. "Shift change," the creature announced. It lunged. Val rolled to the side as the creature's fist, a hammer of fused bone, smashed into the spot where she had been standing. The impact shook the mountain. She saw an opening in the tower's base, a jagged tear in the metal, pulsating with red light. It was a wound in the structure, leading inside. "Go!" Elias screamed. "Go before he archives you!" Val didn't think. She sprinted for the tear. The metal edges were sharp, slicing her jacket and skin as she squeezed through. She fell onto a floor of grating. The inside of the tower was hollow, a vast vertical shaft rising into darkness. The air was hot, smelling of ozone and burning meat. And floating in the center of the shaft, suspended by hundreds of taut wires hooked into its flesh, was the heart of the signal. It was a mass of biological matter, dozens of people fused into a single spherical orgy of limbs and faces. They were the missing, the hikers, the drivers, the lost children of Mile 43. Their mouths were all open, their jaws unhinged, screaming in silent unison. But they weren't screaming random noise. A massive copper electrode was jammed into the center of the mass. It was drawing power from them. And below the floating mass, sitting on a solitary metal platform suspended over a bottomless pit, was a desk, a dispatcher's console. It was pristine. The monitors were on. The green lines of the waveform were flatlining. The headset lay on the desk. It was waiting. Val stood up, her breath hitching. The sound outside the tower, the wind, the siren, the chaos, was muffled here. Inside, there was only a low, expectant hum.
She walked toward the desk. She didn't want to, but her legs moved on their own. The vibration of the floor was syncing with her heartbeat, hijacking her motor functions. She reached the platform. She looked at the screen. It was a script typed in glowing green text. Timestamp +6 hours. Operator Valerie Hart. Message: Mile 43 is secure. Signal strength 100%. Accepting new traffic. "No," Val whispered, gripping the edge of the console. "I won't say it." Behind her, the tear in the wall sealed shut with the sound of healing flesh. From the darkness above, the fused mass of bodies shifted. 100 eyes looked down at her. "You must," they whispered, their voices echoing like a choir in a cathedral. "The silence hurts us, Val. If you don't speak, we feel the fire. Speak and we sleep." Val looked at the headset. It was warm. It pulsed like a living organ. If she didn't put it on, the pain of these people, the pain of Elias, of Hicks, of Sarah Jenkins, would continue forever. The tower needed a conductor to regulate the agony. She looked at the talk button. Her hand trembled as she reached for the headset. She lifted it. The plastic felt like skin. The earpiece felt like a wet tongue against her ear. She sat down in the chair. It molded instantly to her spine, soft and warm, holding her in a loving, suffocating embrace. She pressed the headset against her head. The connection was instantaneous. A jolt of pure, white-hot electricity shot through her skull. It wasn't pain, it was knowledge. She saw the mountain for what it was, a tumor on the reality of the world, a listening post for something that lived beneath the crust of the earth. She heard every radio in America. She heard the truckers, the cops, the insomnia-ridden ham operators.
She heard them all, and she realized they were all waiting for her. The monitor blinked, recording in 3, 2, 1. Valerie Hart opened her mouth.
Valerie Hart didn't speak the words. The words spoke her. As the headset settled over her ears, the sensation of having a body, arms, legs, lungs, evaporated. She was no longer a biological entity standing on a metal platform suspended over a pit. She was a current. She was a conduit. The script on the screen didn't scroll. It downloaded directly into her optic nerve. Blackwood dispatch to all monitoring stations, Val said. Her voice wasn't shaking. It wasn't the terrified rasp of a woman who had just crawled through a hellscape of fused bone and machinery. It was smooth, resonant. It possessed the synthetic perfection of a pre-recorded message, yet it carried the undeniable warmth of a living soul. Above her, the sphere of fused victims, the heart of the signal, stopped screaming. The hundreds of faces melted into expressions of drug-induced bliss. The pain was gone. Val had taken it. She was the filter now. She was scrubbing the agony from the frequency so the creature beneath the earth could feed on the pure, distilled consciousness. She felt the roots of the mountain coiling around her ankles, moving up her calves, piercing her skin, not with pain, but with a cold, numbing finality. They were locking her into the chair. She looked at the timestamp on the monitor. It didn't say 4:45 a.m. It read 10:45 a.m. She was broadcasting into the future. Status report, Val continued, her eyes fixed on the darkness below the platform, where something massive and ancient was stirring in the deep crust, waiting for its breakfast. Mile 43 has been stabilized. The previous operators have been archived. The road is clear for new traffic. She paused. A tear leaked from her right eye, the last drop of moisture left in her body. It didn't fall. It crystallized instantly into a diamond of salt and static. "Do not send rescue," she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming the hum of the mountain itself. The screen flashed, transmission complete. The lights in the tower surged to a blinding white. Thou threw her head back, her mouth opening in a silent scream, as the high-voltage current of the mountain poured in.